Hey everybody, it's Billy Baughman. I wanted to talk to you today about Taoism and probably more specifically about Lao Tzu. I found this book. It's called The Secret Tao by D.W. Krager, Dr. Krager. The subtitle is Uncovering the Hidden History and Meaning of Lao Tzu. It's a really fascinating book. It's an interesting alternative to a lot of books on the Tao Te Ching, a lot of translations, a lot of books on the history of Lao Tzu. It takes an archaeological, historical approach to uncover and kind of understand where Taoism came from, the history of Lao Tzu, who he is, and really how he influenced Taoism. And Dr. Krager poses a really interesting question, maybe controversial in the world of Taoism, Eastern religion. But he poses the question: did the concept, and I'm reading here, did the concept of Taoism predate the writings of Lao Tzu? All right, that's kind of interesting. You know, that's not what what you usually read in most books about Taoism, about Tao Te Ching and all of that. I mean, Lao Tzu is the man when it comes to Taoism. So, really interesting approach. I wanted to read a little bit here from you for you. Part 1. Deconstructing the Tao, I think, is really interesting. And in order to understand Lao Tzu, first it would help to answer the question, questions such as, who was Lao Tzu? Did he really write the Tao Te Ching? And if he didn't, who did and why? Unfortunately, we know very little about the origins of the book. All we can do is to explore the history and archaeology of ancient China, and to look for clues that may help explain the origin of the mysterious Taoist beliefs. The true meaning of Lao Tzu will be found by deconstructing the Tao. And that's a really interesting approach, I think. So a little bit further in Chapter 1, The Legend of Lao Tzu. Let me just read a little bit. I won't read too much, but and just so you know, I will probably mispronounce some of the Chinese names, cities, that sort of thing. So please don't flame me. By all means, feel free to correct my Chinese in the comment. But there it is. So, according to legend, thousands of years ago, before Alexander the Great, before Julius Caesar, before Socrates, before Buddha or Jesus, there lived a great philosopher known in the ancient world as Lao Tzu, a very important person at the time. It is believed that Lao Tzu was advisor to the emperor, royal librarian, and elder teacher of the young philosopher Confucius. Now, I had no idea about that. I think that's really fascinating. I'm sure if you're a student of Taoism, of the Tao Te Ching, with Lao Tzu, this is old hat, but I thought that was interesting. Now, as the legend goes, one day Lao Tzu was old and disillusioned with civilization. He left the confines of the Zhao dynasty, where he lived and worked. Wanting only solitude and nature, he went off into the Chunggang Mountains. Help me there, please. Toward Tibet. As he was leaving the west gate of the empire, an officer on duty begged him to create a book of his wisdom before he left. In response to this request, he produced 2 volumes, one labeled Tao and the other labeled Day. And then he disappeared into the mountains. His 2-volume book, now this is Dr. Krager reading again here. In his 2-volume book, the Tao Te Ching laid a foundation that was built upon by philosophers in Asia for the next 2 millennia. He was, and this is I find very, very interesting. He was to the east what Socrates and Plato were to the west. Now, back to the book. Unfortunately, we actually know very little about the man we call Lao Tzu. The only reason why we know as much as we do about Lao Tzu is probably because of his well-known protege, Confucius. Now, this next part I find extremely, extremely interesting. No one is sure exactly who Lao Tzu was or where he came from. Now, I'm going to finish reading this little chapter here, and then I'm going to stop because I don't want this to be too long. But when I read this chapter, it made me think of somebody else, a Western author, Western writer, philosopher, maybe. So let me read it, and then I'll tell you who I was thinking of. No one is sure exactly who Lao Tzu was or where he came from. Scholars still argue about his identity. The name Lao Tzu is really just a nickname, meaning old boy or old philosopher. Reportedly, Lao Tzu was a man named Lao Tan, who lived approximately from 604 to 531 BC. But it's also been suggested that Lao Tzu was another man named Li Er. No one can be certain, though. There are no records that survived, except for this book and the reports of meetings that he had had with the famous philosopher Confucius. Really, I find that fascinating. I find this whole paragraph fascinating. And you know what? It makes me think of William Shakespeare. Well, did William Shakespeare write all those sonnets? Did he write the plays? No one knows for sure, right? I mean, probably did, but who knows? Anyway, back to Lao Tzu and the Secret Tao. I'm not going to read anymore. I don't want to make this too long. I just found this fascinating. It's a great read. It also includes a very, very interesting translation of all 81 of the all 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching. There's also some amazingly beautiful photography in here. There, and it's laid out beautifully. You can get this at bookstores. You can also get it online at Amazon, and it's an ebook as well. So I would definitely suggest it if you're interested in a really interesting approach to the Tao, the history of the Tao, a very scientific approach, a philosophical approach. This really is an interesting book, and definitely suggest getting it. Thanks for listening, and take care. Bye bye.